Welcome to Everything's Not Black and White, a podcast about perspectives with your hosts, Lala and Brian. Hey everybody, welcome to today's episode. We're so glad that you're joined us yet again. We are here with a very special guest. This young man is one of the most engaging, electrifying, encouraging, all the E's kind of guy. I love this young man, Donté Woods-Spikes. He is a great friend of Brian and myself, and we are glad to have him on the podcast today. Today, we'll be tackling the issue of poverty, generational poverty, and how you can break the cycle. Socioeconomic status in this country definitely puts a lot of challenges and barriers in the way of folks living their best life and pursuing that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness that is written so well that started this country. So there's a lot of people who are on the outs of that margin, and we want to talk about that and how we can move forward with it. So welcome to the ENBW podcast, Mr. Donté Woods-Spikes. Hey, Donté.
Hey, how you doing? Thank you for having me. I'm so glad that I'm here, and thank you to everybody that's tuning in to this conversation right now. I'm very interested in sharing how I grew up in poverty and my perspective of what is going on right now with a lot of our children and even some of our adults too, and how we can start to address it from a different perspective and not the same exact way we've been trying to do it. I feel like that is what's causing it to constantly happen over and over, and it just recycles itself and passes it on down to the next generation. So I'm very, very excited to talk about this today.
Okay, Brian, for our listeners who don't understand what would constitute poverty in America today, can you give them a little bit more information about that?
Sure. Here in the United States, if you have 2 adults and 2 children living in the same household and you make $25,926, you're considered at the poverty level. Currently, right now, the U.S. has 11.8% of its citizens in the poverty level, and that equals over 38 million Americans that are under that bar.
That's a crazy statistic. 38 million people living in poverty today. And so, Donté, you alluded to in your introduction that you were born and raised in poverty. Can you talk to us a little bit about your childhood?
Yeah, so one thing that I did have that a lot of other children around me didn't have was a 2-parent household. But they both were young, and they both did not acquire any wealth from their parents. No, they didn't inherit much. No trust funds, was none of that stuff. It was just, look, you're young, you had kids, now you're going to have to take care of them. And we grew up.
When you say young, how young are you talking?
Born. Like my parents?
Yes.
My mom was 20 when she had me.
Okay.
And I believe my dad was 23, okay. 23 or 24. So, they're young and they had to do what they had to do. As a kid, but I didn't understand or know what poverty was because it's where I grew up. It's where my friends grew up. It's where most of my family was. So I'm thinking, hey, we're just living life. This is what it's supposed to be. This is how things are supposed to happen. What you see, what you don't have, what you do have, this is just the norm. As I got older, I started to question why we were living in the neighborhood that we were living. I say around 3rd to 4th grade, as I started getting older and developing feelings and not understanding what was going on around me. I couldn't understand why my parents wanted to stay there from my perspective as a kid. Like, why are we living here? Can we go somewhere else? I'm seeing stuff on the Disney Channel. I want to go where they live on the Disney Channel. I'm watching Nickelodeon and seeing these kids, and I'm like, is this real?
Right.
And learning things about history in school too. I'm thinking we should just go. But as I started to get older, I recognized that it was poverty. Poverty played a major role in why we couldn't move when we wanted to move, why we had limited access to certain things, why my parents had to work the jobs they had to work, why they had to work the crazy hours they had to work to provide for me and my sister, and why the environment we were in didn't produce much for us or anyone else around us. And I say my personal experience because it's very easy to revert to statistics and break down, well, you should just do this, or this is why it happened from a numerical perspective. But sometimes you have to see the person in it, and sometimes you have to put yourself in it too. And if you cannot put yourself in that position, you won't understand the level of impact it has on a person and how easy it is for a person to not know what's going on around them, how they can be taken advantage of, how they may not know how to budget their money, because money is important right now. So I'm going to buy what I can right now to survive to the next day. I'm not thinking about long-term money. I just can't, because my survival instincts are going crazy on a day-to-day basis. That's what I want people to understand when it comes to poverty. We can talk about it all day, but who is the person that is experiencing it, and what exactly do they need for that predicament in their life to change?
And I think a lot of it, you expressed that your parents worked so hard just to even make it, and they were still in poverty. I grew up in the rural South, which rural poverty is probably a little different than, being in the urban, city poverty. But, my grandmother was a domestic, which means she worked in cotton fields. She worked in the back of restaurants and in houses for being a nanny for more affluent white families. There was no 401k plan for my grandmother. There was not even a union. There was no benefits there. She didn't get medical, dental, none of that. She worked literally to pay for her children just to get food. So when you think about that from a generational perspective, you don't get the benefit of learning how to do investments, how to do retirement income, how to even work where your money, quote unquote, works for you versus you working for it. And none of that education was available.
Right.
And so it's a bit of how do you present new opportunities for people to look at finances and financial, wealth differently than just living paycheck to paycheck. We didn't have that opportunity. At what point do you feel like did you learn about poverty and how to try to help yourself get out of it? And then what did you see as then your role to help others?
Yes. It's interesting that you said that, because when I went to New York for a family member of mine, my great uncle that had passed away, I interviewed my other great uncle about just how they grew up. And he came from the South, and he was sharing as a kid how everyone in the South was poor, and how that played a role in the Underground Railroad and Southern hospitality, because everybody recognized, like, we don't have anything, so we're going to share with each other. And he shared how he said black women were working for white women, and they were just picking cotton all the time. Like, everybody was working just so they could make ends meet. So, it's been going on for a while. For me, I really understood what poverty was when I went to college. And I think that was the first time I heard the word, to be completely honest. I'm like, poverty, what is this? But I felt the sense of embarrassment when I first learned about it, because I talked about this a little bit in my TEDx talk. But what happened was, I was in a class that was a sociology class, and we were talking about poverty, and every single statistic that they had explained who I was, like, black men, the neighborhood that they live in, the age. And I was like, wow, this is kind of hurtful to be sitting here in a room full of white people that look nothing like me. I'm the only black person in the classroom. And every time they say something, everybody kind of glances at me. I'm like, oh, damn.
Put you on the spot.
But afterwards, I began talking to my teacher and telling him, like, this is difficult for me to process, because I didn't know they were studying poverty. I didn't know there was a term for it. I didn't know about broken glass theory. I didn't know about redlining. When you start hearing all these things, it really hurts. When you try to get away from it, go to a place to educate yourself, and the education that you do get lets you know that a lot of it was intentional. People were forced to be poor. And now we have a group of have and have nots. And it's a little bit scary, because as much as we talk about it right now, it seems like we're still having issues with equality and giving everyone a fair opportunity at opportunities and having money and jobs. But when you have that generational wealth where it's passed down to you, you have a little bit of a head start, and you don't have to wait. If you can pay for something, you don't have to wait. there's not too much competition. You can have it whenever you want it. But if you have to wait for something, after a while you say, I don't even care. I'll just settle for what I can get for the time being. And you will usually settle for something that may not have that much value and won't add much to your life. And that's a position that I see a lot of people in. And after that, I said, okay, Donté, you know where you grew up now. You really don't have much of an excuse to just stare at something and not do anything. And that's how my journey began. And I got involved with the community. I started volunteering at churches, community centers, whatever I could do to show my face, have a better understanding, and connect with my own people. Because it's easy for you to have this snooty attitude once you understand what it is and look down on people. So I had a period where I was like, y'all don't want better for yourself. But how can someone do better for themselves if no one is giving them the opportunity to do so?
That's right.
I think you both have some great points there. One thing that I noticed is there's a lot of different types of poverty, including situational, absolute, relative, urban, rural. But the one that you guys are speaking of most is about generational poverty. And I wanted to ask both of you, because I think this is something very unique to the Black community. Do you guys feel like you have been put in a situation where you have broken the cycle going forward from where you are right now in your lives?
I would say yes for myself personally. And I think about my grandmother. Everything I do in my life, I think about my grandmother. You know, my grandmother was forced out of primary school at a very early age to work in cotton fields. You know, my mother was the first person in our family to even go to college, to even think beyond where she was born in this rural southern state where everything was segregated, for that fact of the matter, and for her to have college. And then my sister and I both went to college, and I look at my own daughter now who went to college and finished college before she even finished high school.
Ooh, that girl on fire.
So, I mean, I think I want to say yes, because we have more access to education and opportunities than my grandmother could ever dream of, than my mother could ever dream of. So I would hope that as I'm teaching my daughter, because I do teach her about finance, I teach her about debt and income and credit cards and student loans and everything else that can literally hold people down and shackle them. You know, I always talk about debt being the new slavery, where that really can shackle people down, where you can't think long term, like you mentioned earlier. You only think short term in the right now. So I feel like I've given her a leg up way beyond than I was given, than my mother was given, and definitely more than my grandmother was given. So I feel like the cycle can indeed be broken from a family perspective. But when you start talking about an entire race of people, an entire system of people, we've barely scratched the surface.
For me, I would say yes, because one, my intense desire to connect with people from different environments has opened up so many doors for me. So not only do I have access to people that live in poverty, but I also have access to people that grew up with money and can be mentors to me and say, like, you know, this is what we do. This is how we do it. And that is one of the best things that has happened to me, because it shifted my mindset. The way I thought, if I ever had children, all I knew was what was given to me, and I felt like that's all I could give to them. But I've been able to go to schools where I was like, whoa, like these are high schools where it almost looks like a college campus. Or I've been able to speak at places where just the culture is so different. It's almost, it's shocking to know that it exists. It's like, this is stuff you only see on TV. Am I supposed to be treated this nice?
Right.
Am I somebody supposed to care this much for me? And to recognize that it's something that can happen on a consistent basis. Usually for people that live in poverty, they get one chance for something like that to happen, and they talk about it their whole life.
Right.
But I've been able to have chances and opportunities where it's happened to me on a consistent basis. And what I would like to do is take those experiences and pass them on to the children of the next generation, or anyone around me that may want to do something similar to me.
Yep.
And I'm like, hey, look, this is what I have. This is what I know. And I'll sit down with you and share with you what's been given to me. But, you know, there's definitely some work that has to be put in, but it exists. So giving someone a visual and to let them know that a life outside of this environment exists. Like when I started a teens group with the boys and I was asking them questions about their life and where they go and what they do, they were all just like, we hang out around here, we play basketball. And they were seniors in high school, so they don't even leave their own neighborhood. That is extreme. To not go to another side of town just to see a friend, to go out to eat. That's a new improved version of poverty. It's poverty, then it's almost like I don't even know what else to do because this is all I've ever seen and this is just what makes sense to me.
Do you think that's one of the challenges for young black men because they never get into an environment where they see that kind of success?
Oh yeah, that's a major challenge. I'll say, and for me, all I ever saw was negative depictions of black men growing up. Luckily, I had my father, who I saw go to work, come home to us, play with me and my sister. We all have fun, eat together. But the other men that I saw on TV or in the neighborhood, I always saw the negative version. And I always questioned, like, what is going on? How is this always happening? But once again, as I began to educate myself, when you put things into a historical context, with black men, ever since they've been in America, it's been normal for them to die at a young age. Just take that. A person that accepts their fate and says, there's a strong possibility I could die at a young age. I don't have too much hope. Whatever someone gives me, it can't be real because I know that sooner or later my life may be ending. And not only may my life end, the other person next to me that looks just like I do and lives just like I do, they're in the same exact position. So finding a way out of that and believing that you can do something different is so hard to do. It took me a while. I had to go through a lot of stuff to get to a point where I said, I want different. But before then, it took years worth of reprogramming myself to embrace a new way of thinking and living my life.
Do you remember what the TEDx was called, the one that you did?
Yeah, Young Black Men Not Left Out Again.
Okay, so if you get a chance to listen to that, and we'll have it linked into our podcast, he really goes much more in depth with his story about his transition from where he grew up to where he is now, and it's a phenomenal watch. So definitely check that out.
Donté, what do you think is going to take for us to flip this narrative, this generational poverty, this situational poverty, like this ideal of poverty that we can't get out of? Like, what do you think is going to take for us to move forward?
One of the things that I see is there's a lot of people that talk about it, but where they're stationed, what they're doing, how they're doing it, it may be a great thing, but it's not helping the environments that are in dire need of assistance, of resources, of all of those things. And I say, you know exactly where the kids are. Sometimes I go to meetings and events and they have all the stats mapped out. They got people talking about it, and you got people flying all over the world expressing what poverty is. But I'm in those environments. I'm with the children that aren't eating. I'm with the children whose parents don't have that much money, and I don't get to see those people present. Why is it that businesses are not near where those children are? Why is it that psychologists and psychiatrists aren't flooding schools to have their office there?
Right.
If this is what you want to do. But we all know that there's no money in those areas. And I said that's why I share my personal story, because what I feel my gift is giving people a visual and giving them someone that they can look at and say, oh, I didn't see it that way. Because it's easy to remove yourself from a situation and context when there's no face in front of you.
Right.
You can hear about someone being harmed, but if you see someone being harmed in front of your face, right, your actions are very different compared to just watching it on the news. So a lot of people are removed from poverty in that sense, to where they're not face to face with it. So their approach is not as intense as it should be, because as a society, we have the money and resources to turn poverty upside down in 1 week if we wanted to.
Right.
But, the people that may be in positions to help have the resources, have the knowledge, have the understanding. They don't live in those environments, nor are they invested in those environments.
So yeah, Donté, I spend a lot of time doing diversity, equity, inclusion in the corporate environment, and I talk a lot about allyship and what that means for people who don't understand this way of life firsthand, right? For them to experience it. And it's really about asking somebody curious questions and say, help me understand your experience. Tell me what I can do personally to support you.
Right.
And it really takes a step forward. And it's not just lip service. It's also action. It's like, I want to do something to change this narrative.
Yes.
And it takes people really seeing it every day and not taking a blind eye to it for the needle to actually move.
Yeah, I agree with that.
What do you think are a few of the ways the inner city community, the young kids, can find ways to get out of their situation with poverty being surrounded by them? How can they get an influence or a break or something to push them forward so they're propelling themselves further in life?
Well, first things first is to educate yourself. Sit down, read a book, do some research, and if you have the opportunity, go to college. Because one, you're in a completely different environment where everyone's there for the same exact reason, and you have people of multiple cultures and backgrounds. So not only will you get an education, but you'll get a completely different experience being around people that have different lives than you do.
And that's important.
It is very important.
You need to understand other perspectives.
That gave me so much insight, because I'm like, whoa, there's people that come from this side of town where I never went, and also seeing people in worse positions than I am. People from other countries. Yeah. So it just opened my eyes up, because most of us, wherever we are, usually there's a lot of people that are in the same position as us, and we don't have to deal with someone that's not from our environment or our communities. So college gives you that, and the education of understanding where you are, and as people are talking about you, what they are saying. Me going to college gave me a different insight to what people saw when they saw black males. Like I said, some of it was also me being victim to media and propaganda and the criminalization of black men when I was younger. And I'm like, I don't want nothing to do with that. But the more you ignore that, the more that cycle perpetuates itself, and poverty plays its role in destroying those black boys and not giving them a chance or opportunity to be seen as humane individuals.
That's right.
And finding a mentor. And, sometimes we take the word mentor and we put so much emphasis on it, and we give the person that's mentoring someone so much power. But a lot of my mentors have no idea that they're my mentors. Yeah. I'm just watching them. The way that they talk about things, the way they express themselves, the way they address issues is something that I can relate to. And they give me insight. They give me a different way to challenge myself. Like, I need to go a little bit further.
That's one thing I love about what you're saying. When I grew up without a father, I would always use my friends' dads or male role models that they would have no idea that I was taking note, but I would always pull the best of each person out to try to fill that void where I needed to fill it up.
And I think with young black men that are in poverty, that's one of the hardest barriers to overcome is, one, being vulnerable with other people and tapping into your feelings and emotions and giving yourself a different point of view about life. Because once again, like I said earlier, that your life is not promised. And, that statement is very serious, not just a cliche. Your life isn't promised, and you may start to live that way. When I grew up with a 2-parent household. I had a little bit more attention and help, but I was from the same environment and I had those same thoughts. But when my mind shifted, I said, I can't die yet. I have a lot of stuff that I need to do. Right. And I have people that I need to connect with before it's all over with. I can guarantee if we could get a lot of those young black men to transition into a different way of thinking, they could take all of the skills and things that they already use and transition it into a different way of life. And they can be business owners.
Absolutely.
A lot of them are gifted at doing business, music, production, speaking, whatever it may be. But they don't have access to that where they are. So they have to settle for something else during that time.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So if our listeners want to get involved and say, I want to do something tangible, I want to take action today to help change the lives of folks who have been faced with poverty, what do you suggest they do to get started?
You have to start all the way back from the very beginning. Whatever misconceptions you have, whatever may scare you, whatever stereotypes may have been embedded inside of you, you have to address them before you try to do it. Because you could go to an environment where you want to help, and everything that you would like to do feels impossible because of how overwhelming it is to see people in the conditions that they're in, or to see people saying or acting in a certain way that you're just not used to. So first things first, you got to break yourself down and say, what is it I want to do? And what parts of me do I need to address before I do so? Because you can do much more damage to a person by trying to help them when you're not in a position to provide for them in a way they need to be provided for.
Yeah.
You can, have this vicarious way of trying to push yourself onto them and not give them a chance to share with you what it is they're going through and what they need help with.
Yeah.
Also, think about somebody that you love, your mother, your father, your child, your cousin, aunt, a family member, a friend, and how you want the best for them. If an opportunity comes up and you want them to have it, if you're doing something and you're going somewhere and you want them to come with you, if you're connected to someone in poverty, do that as well for them. Because what may be normal to you can be one of the best days of their life or an eye-opening experience and a feeling that they may have never felt before. Those moments right there where they become human and not a charity case is where they can embrace what it is you're doing, and they have a lot more trust for you. I feel like that's more so for adults. It also attains to children, but for children, I would say you have to get to know them first. You have to get to know them, who they are, what they want to do. And once you figure that out, you expose them to the things they're speaking about. Or you just keep opening up their minds and asking them, what do you want to do? How do you feel? Where do you want to go? Because it's, as a kid, it's easy to do what you think someone wants you to do. It's easy to say what you think someone wants you to say. Because, when the cameras are on you and people are around, they come from a different environment, you make sure you do everything right. It's easy for me to say, yeah, I enjoy the time I'm spending and they real nice for what they doing for us. But usually when that person leaves, the same thing that the kids have been going through before then, they have to go right back to.
That's right.
So developing a real authentic relationship with the children and understanding their background and what they want to do, where they want to go, and how they feel is imperative. You can give them things in the moment, but when it comes to long term and their lives and them transitioning into becoming healthy adults, if you want to give to that, you have to do that. If you want to give to that, you have to make sure that you're a part of their lives in that aspect.
Right. Access and opportunity is the differentiator for so many things.
Yeah, the role of a mentor cannot be understated enough. If you go in there and you do a good job and it's not just about you being a mentor and it's about the kid, you can really change lives. You can change worlds. You can change everything about that child and giving them that hope and that motivation, not just with children, with adults too. And it's instrumental. I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Yeah. And another thing I had talked about the other day when I was on a panel about sometimes children being exploited And if you can have an organization, a nonprofit, whatever it may be, and sometimes when things are over and done with, you feel like, man, were the children in our community just exploited so they could be on a picture, or so a person can say, hey, look what I did, or look where we were, and look at the stats we have now that we can show you. And it's more so about, we're willing to go to this environment, but how much are we willing to invest in this environment and make sure that the people here, I believe that they can also have my job and do what I'm doing. Right. When is it going to be that? And not just, I went and talked to this poor black woman in this neighborhood and she shared how she's struggling, and this is the opportunity that we give her to share her testimony. Right. When can we help change her life? Right. When, or that kid, when will I introduce them to a different environment? And also, whatever their minds are wishing for, I grant them that wish with a simple gesture that's so easy to do.
Absolutely. Set them up for a future success.
Yes.
Not just the right now, but the long term that you were talking about. Yeah. So for folks who want to get in touch with you and just like be a part of what you're doing, Donté, how can they contact you?
I have a website that you can go to and you can check out some of the different things I've done over the years. That is www.DontéWoods-Spikes.com. Also, you can always find me on Facebook, on Instagram, and Twitter.
That is awesome, Donté. Thank you. And for those who want to get in touch with us on the ENBW podcast, we have a Facebook page as well as Everything's Not Black and White on Facebook. You can reach out to us via Gmail at enbwpodcast@gmail.com, and also find us on our website at www.lbbedutainment.com. Thank you, Donté, for being with us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Donté. It's been great.
Thank you for having me.
All right, we'll see you all next time. Take care and have a great day. This has been Everything's Not Black and White, a podcast about perspectives with your hosts, Lala and Brian, a production of LBB Edutainment.